Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 51 of the Stark Reflections podcast. This is your host, Mark. In the main segment of this show, I interview Rachel Amplett, the author of the successful Dan Taylor and Kay Hunter police procedural thrillers, as well as the standalone thrillers and mystery novels she has written. We talk about how she was earning enough from her global ebook sales to transition to full-time writing without having broken into the U.S. market, and without Amazon being her number one market. We explore her strategies for writing as a business while leaving room for passion projects and creativity, and we dig into the audiobook release strategy that she's used for success. We also speak a lot about a topic related to this episode's sponsor, Findaway Voices, and that is not only their global distribution options that have allowed for Rachel to see sales in the completely unexpected audio markets, i.e. well outside of Audible, and also for her to take back control of her prices and the giveaway code options that she has through Findaway Voices. The author's direct option that Findaway Voices is beta testing is progressing quite nicely. They're in the process of migrating the platform so that the authors who are in the program can now cross-promote and cross-pollinate listening audiences, as well as significant simplifications that make it easier to manage one's own audio landing pages for buying direct. You can check that out via my own link at markleslie.ca/audio. You can, of course, learn more about Findaway Voices via starkreflections.ca/findaway. Now, speaking of audio, I'm recording this right now using the brand new Blue Yeti microphone that I recently purchased, thanks to the generosity and support of patrons of this podcast via patreon.com/starkreflections. Thank you, everyone, for your continued support that lets me know you appreciate the show and that you benefit from it. Thanks also to those who comment either on the show notes at starkreflections.ca or via the Stark Publishing Facebook page, or even my personal Facebook page, or Twitter at Mark Leslie, or other social media. And of course, thank you to those who have left reviews of the podcast on the podcatcher of your choice. It all helps, and I'm truly grateful to all of you. Now, I'm going to keep the personal update relatively short right now. Suffice it to say that I'm going to be heading to Vancouver this weekend to speak at the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers annual conference about writing and publishing. And then almost immediately after I return home, Liz and I are going to be flying to Oklahoma City for the Draft to Digital holiday party. It will be my first visit not only to Oklahoma, but also to the Draft to Digital office. And so I'll also be spending 3 days in the office getting to hang out with some of my colleagues that I've already hung out with before at conferences, but also several colleagues that I've only interacted with on Slack and on Zoom video chats. So it should be a really busy week, but tons of fun. So that's it for personal updates. Why don't we get right on to the interview with Rachel? Hey, Rachel, thanks so much for joining me here on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Good to talk.
Yeah, it's great to see you again. We have chatted for other podcasts together, and we recently were hanging out together in Las Vegas at the WMG Business Masterclass.
That was a blast, wasn't it? I really enjoyed that.
It was fantastic, and it was great to catch up with you because you've been doing so many amazing things. But first, just to go back to the beginning, I want to talk a little bit about your series and the thrillers that you've written, etc. Can you go back to the beginning of your start as a writer and why you had to write these books?
Yeah, I think like a lot of writers, I had to write the books to get the ideas out of my head because the ideas wouldn't leave me alone. And I've been in this indie game for, 7 years published now. I've started writing the first book, White Gold, featuring Dan Taylor, back in 2010 through the local writers' centre back in Brisbane, Australia. And at the end of that, did the usual thing, tried to pitch it around to a few agents and publishers. I had some good feedback with it. But unfortunately, everyone was saying to me at the time, well, one publisher came back and said, we don't want a female Matthew Riley. And other publishers and agents were saying, look, I'm really sorry, it's a great story, needs some work here and there, but vampires are big this year. And out of frustration, I just shelved it for a little while and went into a corner and sulked, and ended up on a couple of very basic forums that were around back then. I mean, this was, when I think back, how indie publishing was still in such in its infancy back then compared to now. And out of the blue one day, I got an email from Vicky Tiley, a mystery author down in South Australia. And she said, well, if you can't get it published by a traditional publisher, have you thought of doing it yourself? And she led me through the whole Smashwords as an aggregator, setting up a Goodreads author page, and that was it. I was off and running, except that I wasn't, because I didn't have a business plan and I didn't have the first clue about marketing. I just knew I loved writing.
Wow. And that's how you started.
Yeah, it seems
Really?
so long ago now.
It's funny. I mean, I look at the huge success that you've had, and I'm thinking, wait a second, you started with a Goodreads page and a Smashwords account. That's really
I didn't even
you've
have
come
a
a long
website.
way.
I think I was very much out in the wilderness for the first 3 years. It was a case of, I really didn't know what I was doing with regard to publishing business, with regard to marketing. When the first book was released, it sold a few copies, and very excitingly to people I didn't know from different parts of the world. And then the emails started coming through. Well, where's the second book in the series? I'm like, second book? What series? And found that these readers, who I had no idea who they were, had fallen in love with that character. And so in 2013, I brought out the second in that series, as it was now, followed in June 2014 by my first standalone action adventure novel. And again, all of that particular story was a story that had to be told. It wouldn't leave my head until I'd got it out onto the paper. In the middle of 2014 was when this all changed for me, big time. I was approached out of the blue by a traditional publisher in Italy who said, look, we loved White Gold, your first book. Our publisher is a huge Robert Ludlum fan, and he would like to publish the Italian version of White Gold. And so I signed a contract with them and negotiated that contract. And it really made me sit up and take notice at the end of that year. By the end of that year, I'd had, they found me, by then I'd had a really basic website. And so once the contract was done and sealed, and I sat down at the end of 2014 and thought, well, if they can find me by accident, if this can happen with no effort on my part, what happens if I put everything I've learned into helping other people run their businesses as a project administrator and put it into my publishing life? And so at the beginning of 2015, I had the covers redone for my Dan Taylor series, so they looked more in keeping with thrillers like Lee Child and Vince Flynn's. And I undertook to publish 3 books a year from then on. And at the time, Kobo was the platform that broke me. In 2015, I did a 99-cent deal on a standalone novel that had been published in March 2015.
Yeah.
We did a 99-cent BookBub deal in the September, and my Kobo sales went off the charts. And I think that's when you and I first
We connected
met
back then.
over emails, because I think you reached out to me and went, I don't know what you're seeing at your end, but this is what we're seeing at our end. What did you
We're
do?
seeing a lot of sales here.
And I haven't looked back since. I've just built on that success across all my platforms, across everything that I do in my business.
Wow. And what I find fascinating about that is when you talk to most authors, like the Amazon sales tend to be 10 times larger than anyone else, tend to be that number one. This is a case where you were living in Australia at the time as well. And I know Amazon does have a presence in Australia, but Kobo had a a bigger presence in some ways in countries like Canada and Australia. So I think you were an example of an author who really took off on Kobo, because for some reason what you were writing was resonating really strongly with the core reader base, which was amazing to see.
Yeah, and I think as well, as you say, that core reader base that Kobo had at the time and still has at a certain age group is that is that demographic that enjoys reading the books that I write. And it was interesting because I didn't break out in the States. I actually had a goal for this year to cement my readership in
Really?
the USA, because
But the
until
US
now I didn't
is
really worry
like a
about it.
big market when you
It
think about it.
is, yeah, but I went full time without the USA being a big part of
You went
my
full, hang on a
sales.
second. You went full time without having broken big in the US? Like
Yeah,
this is like the Joanna Penn evidence that the world is a global market and that there are
exactly.
plenty
Yeah,
of ways you can be very
yeah,
successful even if you haven't broken in the US. That's fantastic. No, but you are successful everywhere. But
yeah,
this was
yeah. I
you're
mean,
talking about the
I
early days
focused
as you
on,
were, okay.
yeah, absolutely. My full-time author business was established without the US being a big player.
Oh, that's really cool. And I think that's enlightening and helpful for authors who maybe are saying, wow, I'm only successful in these markets, but I haven't broken it. That is
Yeah,
fantastic. Really exciting. I guess I didn't realize that. I had assumed that you had already taken off in the US by the time that you said, okay, now I can do this full time.
no, it was actually, I've got my business plan for the year here on my desk. And it was really at the end of last year, I sat down and went, well, okay, that has to be one of my focus points for 2018, is to
Okay.
solidify my readership in the US and build on that, because there are obviously a lot of readers there that I haven't met yet.
Right, right. That's
So it
fantastic.
hasn't been until this year where I've been using things like, social media advertising and things like that to actually hone in on that audience. But no, my Canadian sales do really well without very little effort from me. I've got a very warm readership there.
Oh, that is fantastic to hear. Now, you've also, beyond the various novels that you've released, you've also done exceptionally well in audiobooks. You got into the audiobook game relatively early because you're quite well established there. Can you talk a little bit about how is that part of your sort of your business plan?
Yeah, that was very strategic, because I didn't have my act together until a little too late in 2015. I felt that I missed that ebook revolution that a lot of people rode the wave on at the end of 2014, 2015. And I sat here, as a business owner, and thought, well, I'm not going to miss out with the audiobook one, because that's building up, that's coming. Um, with the Dan Taylor books, I decided to do the royalty split with ACX. That was the way I got those out. But because my detective books, Detective K Hunter, they were doing so well from the outset that I was able to, they basically paid for themselves. I was able to invest some of the money that those books were bringing in to have the audiobook versions made, so that I owned 100% of the rights. And then
Right.
I had the freedom to do anything I wanted with those audiobooks. And that's been fantastic leverage in the business.
That's amazing. But you did that very strategically. So as the money from the K Hunter books were coming in, you put some aside and said, I'm going to reinvest this back in audio.
Absolutely. I waited until I had 3 books in the series out in paperback and ebook. Then I could see how much they were making and how much, what the baseline was on the worst case scenario. Then I shopped around to work with a producer and narrator. They are actually based here in the UK, even though I was in Australia. Because the series is based in the UK, I knew I wanted an English narrator.
Right.
And I wanted a narrator who was going to stick with me for the whole series. So
Oh,
when I
yeah,
was
for
pitching it to
consistency,
them,
right?
absolutely, it's so important because readers get very much attached to narrators. And I have audiobook readers now who write to me or do reviews. And Alison, my narrator, to them, she is Kay Hunter now.
Yeah, that's
They
brilliant.
know they know her little foibles, the way she narrates the stories. And the flip side of that is, because after I shopped around to find her and the producers, I had the first 3 books done in one go. And then we launched them all over the course of October last year, October 17. so that by the time the fourth book in the series came out in November 17, that launched at the same time as the audiobooks. So every time one of those books came out in the past 12 months, the audiobook has been done at the same time.
Wow. That's amazing. You stacked up 3 audiobooks and had the
Yeah,
fourth one ready to go
ready to go.
within a 2-month period.
Yeah. I worked with Findaway Voices, and we started. I worked very closely with them and said, when are you going to be ready? When can we get these out to market? And working with them, I was able to target the beginning of October 2017. I think the last one went live worldwide before I got on the plane for BoucherCon last year and came over to Canada.
Right, which is when we met for the first time in person.
Yeah. Yep.
So the audiobook, and again, before we started the interview, we were chatting a little bit about some of the things that you've learned. And I think when you did the first Dan Taylor book, you had released it, you were surprised because people said, okay, when's book 2? You've taken some of those learnings, you applied that to your audiobook release strategy. But then there's also a new series that you were mentioning, and we won't want to give anything away, but you've got the first manuscript ready or first draft ready, but you're not going to be doing anything with it until how many books are ready to go?
I'm going to wait until there's 3 there. What I have found with the K Hunter series, I love writing them, but having just emigrated back from Australia to the UK, there's been such upheaval in my life since I published the last K Hunter book in July, that I'm a bit on the back foot with the publishing schedule.
Right.
And so it feels like I say to people, it's the hamster wheel of death. If you're not careful, you're running around on your little hamster wheel. You publish a book and you're taking off to get the next one ready in 4 months' time. And I've used the last 3 months of this year to take a step back in the business, still write the next K Hunter book that's going to be coming out early 2019, but to look at the business and go, okay, how can I position myself in this business so I can still do what I love, which is the writing, but still put out books at such a pace that I don't make myself ill on that hamster wheel trying to keep up with it. And so that's why I've decided, with one manuscript here, I know the arc of the series as well. It is going to be another police procedural series. I'm just doing something different with it. It's going to be a little darker than the K Hunter ones.
Right.
And I'm experimenting with the way the team dynamics are as well. And so, yeah, I'm going to enjoy writing them. Okay. I'll wait until I've got at least the third one into a first draft. Right. And then I'll start publishing them in between the K Hunter ones and the other passion projects that I've got lined up for next year.
Wow. I'm so impressed that you, in the midst of all of these changes and in the midst of knowing, Oscar Wilde, nothing succeeds like excess and the rapid publishing, the popular theme in indie publishing of rapid release and stuff like that you take the time to sit back and apply strategy and say, wait a second, I really need to look at this. You constantly have that business acumen throughout your career. Where did that come from?
I think it's come from a frustration of working for other people and seeing them stuff up their businesses when they should be listening to. I come from a project background.
Okay.
And what you're supposed to do in Project 101 is, when you're nearing the end of a project, is you sit down and you have a lessons learned session. You sit there and you assess the risk analysis that you started at the beginning of the project. You look at what happened, you look at what could have been done better, but nobody does that. Everyone runs on to the next shiny thing and often repeat the same mistakes that they made on a project, the fourth project ago. They're
Right.
Still making the same mistakes. And I think it was, my forehead is probably pretty flat from banging my head against the desk on a regular basis, working for other people and seeing them repeat these mistakes. And you see businesses go into the ground because of that. I've been made redundant from businesses going into the ground because they kept making the same mistakes. And I won't do that in my own business.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And nor do I want to burn out.
Yeah, of course. So taking that time to strategize also sets you back, gives you a bit of a break, and you don't get frustrated because you're still enjoying the writing. You're still having a good time with the characters, right? You're still, that process is still an enjoyable one. It's not a frustrating one where you feel trapped and say, oh no, I got to write another K Hunter.
Absolutely. Okay. And the other thing that I've taken from that project background is I work to a project schedule. So I have an Excel spreadsheet, and across the top, I've got the months of the year. In fact, it's usually 18-month look ahead. And down the side is what I need to do to get a book to publication, except down the side, there are probably 4 or 5 writing projects.
Okay.
So that any time I know when my drop dates are, I can work them back. I can put in my passion projects, or I can put in there a different standalone or something different to give me a bit of a palate cleanse in between my series books.
Okay.
And I know exactly where I have to be and when, and where I have to show up and what I'm supposed to be typing that day.
Oh, wow. That is fantastic. I want to go back to the audiobooks because you talked about working with Findaway Voices, who, we both love, but you've used Findaway Voices to keep full control of your price in most markets, as well as the rights. So you're not locked in. You're available through multiple retailers, multiple library systems. Is it okay if I ask where you found the most? Because I know you're also using their beta version to sell direct.
Yes.
Where are you finding the most success in the various global markets for audiobooks?
I had a lovely surprise, actually, because I like getting the reports, because they've updated their dashboard now, so you can get the real-time reports, which is excellent. But even when they started out, they were very good at providing me with Excel spreadsheets. So I could see where the organic markets were happening, and then I could hone in with social media advertising. And one of the retailers that picked up on my audiobooks was Playster.
Yeah.
Who Drafted Digital I have my ebooks through Drafted Digital, and I have my audiobooks going through Findaway Voices. And Playster's awesome.
That's fantastic.
I probably do better. When the books first came out, I had a better uptake on Playster and a couple of other retailers like that over and above Audible.
Yeah, I know, and you would expect Audible to be the large place. So again, you broke out on Kobo first.
Yeah, I know.
And then Playster.
Rachel breaks all the rules.
But I think it's evidence that there is no single path for publishing success, right? There's different paths for different audiences.
That's right. The trick is to make the stories available. Don't hold the stories back from people. People will find them. You can't predict. There's so many places around the world where your books can be found that you never know where those sales are going to come from. And the way that Findaway do the reporting now, it's great to see those different retailers crop up, because then there was a new retailer that cropped up on my Findaway sales 2 months ago called Books. And I contacted Findaway and I said, I don't recognize this name. Who are they? Are they a new player? They said, no, they're someone that's rebranded, but they're doing really well. They're really going for it. And so I contacted Books and went, hello, my audiobooks are on your website. Can I help my readers find your app? It looks really good.
Right.
I'd like to, work with you. And off the back of that, Books came back to me and said, well, actually, funny you should mention it, because we're about to start doing some promotions. Would you care to write a guest post for us to tee up for Halloween? We're doing a sale. We'll put your book Scared to Death on there. That's, crime.
Yeah.
Bit of, it's scary. Do you fancy writing an article for our blog for us? So I did.
Wow. That's awesome.
And it's just thinking outside of thinking outside of the box is such an overused term, but it really is with indie publishing. You've got to, because the moment somebody finds something that works, everybody runs towards it.
Yes.
Which isn't always necessarily a good thing. You've got to niche down and find those smaller markets that work for you, because when they work for you, your readers and your audiobook listeners in those markets are incredibly loyal.
Oh, wow. That is amazing. And then, so you've also been using Findaway Voices. They have that new Authors Direct, right?
That is proving to be so much fun. And it was a godsend. When Gone to Ground came out, book 6 in the K Hunter series came out in July, I have an audiobook blog tour every time I have an audiobook come out, and it's got a North American USA slant to it. And Audible had turned around and basically announced that unless you were exclusive to ACX, you were no longer entitled to Audible codes to pass on to get reviews.
Oh.
And of course, me with my Authors Direct shop went, I don't care. So I just contacted the tour host.
to
I
give the
just contacted
reviewers?
the tour host and said, look, this has happened. I've got a workaround because I've got my own store. I can provide the bloggers with a link to the app they can download. Here's the code. They can get the book for free. And by the way, would you mind including in your reviews a few words about how easy you found it to use my store and how easy you found using the Authors Direct app? And at least 2 of the reviewers came back within their reviews have gone to ground saying how much easier it was to use the Authors Direct app than Audible's own app.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I think what I liked about that is I could go to your website and I could purchase the book directly from you, which is great because then I know the author gets to keep more than when it's bought through a retailer, which is great, right? Because
Yep.
you want to support your favorite authors. But then I didn't have the frustration of going, okay, now how am I going to listen to it? It goes right to the Authors Direct app, which then means that I could go to another author's website and buy directly from them and listen from the same app. So it does.
Yeah, there are no constraints.
Yeah, the way that Audible works really, really well, or the Kobo app works really, really well for listening to audiobooks, Authors Direct kind of allows you to still sell independent. Like, it's almost like the way BookFunnel made it easier for authors to give
Absolutely.
away free
And
content. Yeah, I love that.
what I really like about the Authors Direct app is that I'm in control of the pricing. So it's not when you put it onto ACX or Audible
Right.
and you are told what your listeners are going to pay. I was running a Facebook promo last month, and it just ticks along in the background, and it's just a simple advert targeting audiobook listeners in the US. They can get the first in series for $4.99. I can't do that on Audible, but I can.
Right.
That's like having a 99-cent first in series ebook. It's like,
Yeah,
here,
exactly.
come and try my audiobook series. It'll only cost you $4.99.
Oh, which is fantastic. It's not going to cost you the $15
It's less
or the
risk.
assumed
Yeah, give
monthly
it a
subscription.
try.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So, audiobooks, ebooks, you have all of your works are available as print on demand, so print readers can still order them from.
Yep, including large print. Yep.
And large print as well. So you've got basically 4 versions minimum of your
That's
books,
right.
right?
Yeah.
To appeal to the different audiences. And again, and I think Joanna Penn talks a lot about the importance of large print. How many people have a large print version of their book, and yet most people who read books, because I know we're ebook people, right? We live in a digital world,
Yeah.
but the majority of people who actually read books, if you actually go out on the street and ask the average person, do you read a book? The answer is usually no. If they do, 70% of the time, yeah, but I don't read ebooks. I read
Yeah.
print.
But it's like I said to you in Las Vegas as well. What's the great thing about all my print stuff, and even before I had the large print versions, was that a good chunk of my print sales comes from libraries around the world.
Oh, of course, yeah.
So even if I'm not selling print to readers, I'm selling them to libraries. And then, of course, England and Australia, it's like Canada. If you're a resident to that country, you get your public lending rights on top of that. So
Oh, yes.
when I have people, I did a blog post a while back and said to people, this is why I will not put my ebooks in Kindle Unlimited. Because honestly, if you want my books for free, go to the library. Go and support
Right.
your library. You're at least you're getting it for free, and I'm still earning something.
Which is fantastic. So public lending rights exist in Canada, Australia, and in the UK as well?
Yeah, I think you have to be resident of the country to
Okay.
get
Yeah, of
that.
course. Yeah,
But
to support homegrown talent, right?
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely, which is brilliant. So
And
the library buys your book, and you earn the royalties through Ingram Spark for that. But then every time that book is loaned out, you earn a few pennies, a few dollars, a few cents here and there. And in the
that's great.
UK, for anyone in the UK listening at the moment, audiobooks and ebooks have just been added to the PLR scheme over here.
Yeah. They did
So
that in Canada
go
last
support
year
your
as well.
libraries, people. Go support your libraries.
So right now, the beautiful thing is you have audiobooks and ebooks and print books available through libraries around the world, basically, in a nutshell.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
if
and it's
not,
just
people can
wonderful.
go to their local library and request Rachel
They
Amplett books,
can.
and the library can easily order pretty much any of those copies through the various
And
channels.
what I'm seeing as well is that there are so many library organizations, because libraries are organized by county council over here. And I'm seeing a lot of county councils advertising the fact that they've got ebooks and audiobooks for people to listen to by the various apps like Overdrive. and things like that on Twitter. So libraries are actively marketing audiobooks for us.
Oh, that is
We've just got to make sure that our audiobooks are available to the libraries in order to do that.
Exactly. So, so much valuable information that you've provided here. I just want to ask you sort of one sort of last question, because you're constantly thinking ahead, you're constantly planning, you're strategizing, you're taking a project approach. What are the things that you believe are going to be most important for writers in the next 12 to 18 months to consider?
I think consistency. I'm looking at my business plan for next year, and I want more content. I'm pulling back on, I was doing a lot of in-person teaching, workshops and things in Australia. I'm not going out of my way to do much of that next year because I really want to improve my craft. I'm constantly learning as a writer. That's really important, is to keep the quality there, to add to the back catalogue. And look at new opportunities around the world through aggregators like Draft to Digital, like Findaway Voices, that we can reach people in other markets that aren't the obvious choices.
Right.
I think there's a lot of niching to be done and still to do.
I like that. There's a lot of niching to be done. There should be a T-shirt with your picture on it.
Or just an audio reminder in your ear.
That's right. Just that little buzz in your ear. Rachel, thank you so much. Such an inspiring, such an informative chat. Always wonderful to chat with you. Can you please let listeners of the podcast know where they can find out more about you and buy all your books?
The easiest way to stalk me is my website. It's www.rachelamphlett.com.
That is fantastic. And there'll be links to all of your stuff, your website, as well as links to your books, etc. from at starkreflections.ca. Thanks so much, Rachel.
Thank you, as always.
I find it fascinating that Rachel had her first big success on Kobo, and not necessarily in the US, but in other global markets. It goes against the common tale of authors always doing Amazon first, or planning on publishing to Amazon first because it's the world's largest bookstore, and even being exclusive to them in the first 90-day tour of duty through KDP Select, or what authors commonly call Kindle Unlimited, which is really the name of the reader-facing side of being exclusive, because it puts your titles into Kindle Unlimited subscription, paid, all-you-can-read program when you choose KDP Select. And Select is the exclusivity program when you're publishing on Amazon through KDP. But Rachel found success outside of Amazon and outside of the US, and it was a large enough success that she was able to write full-time. It's evidence that you can sell in other markets if you are available in those markets. I love what she says about focusing on niche markets. There's a lot of niching to be done, she said. She talks about focusing on very specific targets and how a larger success can come out of that narrow niche focus. I love her strategic approach to writing as a business, yet maintaining a balance for passion projects. I've had the pleasure of hanging out with Rachel a couple of times, and even hanging out with Rachel and her husband Nick, and what I enjoy, apart from the good fun we always have, and the craft beers enjoyed together, is the balance of personable and friendly sharing alongside those business conversations and paying attention to those business smarts. And when relaxing and enjoying the moment with friends, she's right into it, full force and present. And when she's focused on her writing, she's deep into the writing itself. When she's focused on business planning, she's committed exclusively to that. There's a great balance, and it's a difficult one to strike, because how many times do you find your own creative writing distracted by worries about the other things you're trying to do, the marketing, the logistics of publishing, or the other things you're not doing while writing? How many times are you working on some business task or marketing endeavor that you need to do for your writing when you're really longing for the process of actually creative writing and working on that writing itself? Rachel has resolved that and found balance by applying a strategic management business outline that books in and blocks specific time periods for her to get each of the tasks done. So when she's in those tasks, she's committed to and focused on them. It's something I plan on adapting into my own scheduling. Perhaps it's something that might work for you too. Now, earlier on in this episode, I skipped a bit of a personal update because I wanted you to first hear the revelation of Rachel making it big outside of Amazon, specifically on Kobo, and then also selling her audiobooks on other platforms that she wasn't expecting. It kind of ties in with a couple of my own appearances this past week, so I guess part of my personal update. But in it, I was talking about successful publishing strategies, specifically for Kobo, but also in terms of publishing wide. I was a guest on the Science Fiction and Fantasy Marketing podcast earlier this week with Lindsay Baroker, Joseph Lalo, and Jeffrey M. Poole. Episode 210 went live on December 4th, and it was great chatting with the three of them. It was my third appearance on their show, and I'm delighted they were willing to subject themselves to having me back again as a guest. I learn a lot just from talking to them. And I also learn a lot from their awesome show. Now, even though it's called the Science Fiction and Fantasy Marketing Podcast, there are learnings for writers regardless of what genre you write in. There's a link to episode 210 in the show notes at starkreflections.ca, so you can give it a listen, or you can check out their podcast and website in general at marketingsff.com. Also this week, I gave a live webinar via Reedsy specifically on strategies for getting promotional placement at Kobo and catching a merchandiser's eye because it's a different sort of platform. Now, you can see the rerun of that hour-long session on the Reedsy Facebook page, which there'll be a link to in the show notes at starkreflections.ca. And in the session, there are strategies for using at Kobo, whether you're publishing directly through Kobo Writing Life or even if you're coming into Kobo via a third-party distributor. And if you haven't guessed, my positive bias for a distributor might just be using Draft2Digital. Well, that's a bias that existed prior to me even joining Draft2Digital, of course. And even when I was at Kobo, I said, well, if you can't come direct, then at least you should come through D2D. In any case, that was a great session. I really appreciated the attendees. There were some fantastic comments and questions throughout, and I really appreciate the engagement from those folks. So if you're looking for more strategies and ideas on Kobo, as well as publishing outside of Amazon, that podcast or the live webinar where you can kind of watch the video as well are useful. Well, that's it for me for this episode of the Stark Reflections podcast. Again, this is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. Thanks for hanging out with me this week. I do appreciate that you're hanging out and listening to the podcast. I hope you were as inspired as I was by Rachel. And next week, in episode 52, you'll hear a conversation that I had with Gary Collins, who is quite an interesting fellow, who has enjoyed a very diverse and intriguing life, including working as a special agent for the U.S. State Department and Security Service. And his book isn't about that, but instead about the simple life. And we talk a lot about the simple life and the lifestyle reboot that he has done that sort of abandons all of those trappings of the digital world and brings them right back down to the simple life. And that'll be in episode 52 next week. Again, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre. Thanks for hanging out with me. I hope you have a fantastic week. And here's wishing you great writing and good Stark Reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.